Hey, everybody, welcome to our Illuminate session for the month of June. My name is Jim Harger. I think that's the one thing I forgot to put on my presentation here is who I am. So forgive me for that. But I want to talk a little bit about creating a presence in an online class. Just as a little bit of a background, just to kind of give myself the credibility you may be looking for, if that's the way to say it. I've been teaching for almost 9 years now. Most of that has been online. In fact, I finished my one master's degree completely online, half of the other master's degree online, and I'm looking to start a doctoral program this fall online. So I have a lot of experience both as an instructor and a student in online education. I also do some faculty training and mentoring. So some of you that are listening to this or watching this may have seen me in our faculty training course. So I'm glad you're here. We're going to talk a little bit about creating a presence in an online class. So just to kind of get started, I want to kind of set the tone for this and mention first, I think there are a lot of myths about teaching an online class. And one of those myths is that we simply facilitate or moderate a class. We're not actually doing any teaching. And I would argue that point pretty hard and just say that that's not the case. And the second myth that I hear a lot, and to be honest with you, I used to believe this when I started teaching, when I moved from the classroom to an online class. The second myth is that teaching online is easier than teaching an in-seat class. And I would beg to differ there as well. Because I think, as most of you, if you've had any experience teaching online, you'll find that teaching an online class can take actually more time than an in-seat class. I teach at a couple of other institutions as well as Moody, and at one in particular, I teach both in-seat and online. And I tell you, when I get an in-seat class, I kind of look at that as a break. And the reason I do is because, I see the students for 4 hours once a week over the course of the class I'm teaching. But there's not as much interaction required online, even though it's a hybrid course, because so much of the work is done in the classroom. And therefore, I only respond to students for the most part if they reach out to me. So, which is much different than teaching an online class, as we're going to talk about. When we're teaching online, we're engaged with students 3, 4, 5 days a week, probably. And depending on your teaching load and things like that, it can take up a lot of time. So teaching online actually does take a lot more time. And some of the reasons are that it requires a lot more communication with our students. When you're teaching in seat, you see your students face to face once a week or every other day or whatever the schedule is. But when you're online, there's a lot more effort and deliberate action taken to communicate with your students. Also, one thing that's the same as teaching in seat is the grading of students' work, of course. And in some cases, that can actually take more time because more of it is done online than in the classroom. And then finally, we need to support students' learning. And in an online learning environment, that can take a little bit more effort or actually, approach it from a different standpoint with a different strategy. So I think teaching an online class does actually take more time. If you clocked the amount of time you put into an in-seat class versus an online class over the same length of time, the 5 weeks or 8 weeks, I think you'll find that online classwork actually can take more time. That's mostly my opinion. Some things to consider too when we're talking about creating a presence online are the ways that students engage. And I would say the first one is behaviorally engagement. Behaviorally engaged students do what students are supposed to do in class. They adhere to the rules and norms, and they display behaviors associated with persistence, concentration, and attention. And they may ask questions and contribute during discussions. We also have the emotional engagement, which reveals the student's attitudes towards learning. Those attitudes can range from simply liking what they're doing to deeply valuing the knowledge and skills they are acquiring. And then finally, the cognitive engagement involves effort and strategy use. It's wanting to understand something and being willing to go beyond what's required in order to accomplish learning goals. And those who are cognitively engaged use strategies associated with deep learning. So, as we're talking about online presence, we need to consider the way students engage. The general consensus is that engagement is malleable or easily influenced, and it responds to external forces such as the classroom climate of a course. And that leads us to the question of greatest interest to teachers, which is what teacher actions or interventions promote more and deeper student engagement. And this is out of an article from the newsletter Faculty Focus. If any of you don't subscribe to that, I encourage you to do so. It's a free newsletter. It comes out weekly. Beth and I just attended a teaching professor conference a couple of weeks ago, and Faculty Focus is a part of that organization, and so it was great. So all these parts of engagement can be defined separately. They don't function that way. They are dynamically interrelated with the individual. So what does this mean? What does this mean? Why do I even bring it up? I bring it up because we need to consider what teacher actions or interventions promote more and deeper student engagement. If we're talking about an in-seat class, it's a whole nother conversation, but we're talking about online engagement. And the answer to that question is how we do that is by creating an online presence in an online course. So let's take a look at some of the ways that we do that. The first way that we create an online presence is through the use of announcements. There's three different ways that I kind of look at announcements to be used. First, we do a weekly overview, which highlights the topic of discussion, where we may go over the assignments that are due or what it is that we're looking for in the assignments to kind of give our students a little bit of an heads up. I mean, we would do that in the classroom, right? For those of us that have taught in the classroom, when we preview the assignments that are due in the week, we usually always include some of the things that we want our students to pay particular attention to, some of the key elements of the assignment that we want them to make sure they connect with. So, I do the same thing in my weekly overviews. I tell them what the assignments are, some of the key things, and then I may post some clarifications throughout the week to help with that. So an example of a weekly overview is not only talking about the assignments and some of the things I look for, but explaining my expectations for discussions. What is the timeliness that we like to see? In other words, when do we want to see the first initial response to a discussion posted? And then we talk about the amount of participation that we want in the discussion, or when the due date, is. And I find that helps because if we leave it up to our students, we'll get an initial post on Friday and we'll get all the responses on Monday. And does that create a good back and forth discussion? No. It's meeting the requirements, but we're not having a good back and forth. So I tell my students, as it's written in the different places here at Moody, I want my students to participate in the discussion on 3 different days in the week. One in their initial response, and then at least 2 other days reading and responding. So I'll spend some time in my weekly overview kind of highlighting that in the beginning of the course. I also embed a YouTube video of the announcement, and in the faculty training course, we spend some time on how to do that. I think that's very effective in creating an online presence. When I started teaching here at Moody, it was a requirement, so I started doing it at the other places I teach as well. And I've gotten more emails from both Moody students as well as students at other schools that tell me how great they think those videos are. Not because they look good or that I've done them professionally or what have you, but because they can see who I am and they can connect with me in a little bit, in a small way. And I get responses every class that they appreciate the videos and the time and effort that it takes to do those. because they get to know who I am a little bit, put a face to a voice, so to speak. So I embed that into the announcement. And the other thing I do in those announcements is I also include the text of that announcement, and that enables students to either read, hear it, or see it. And so I feel like I'm hitting on two of the three ways that students learn. So I try to hit everything. I also post or try to every week some sort of a midweek announcement. Don't necessarily record it on a video, but sometimes I do. And in the midweek, it may be just a kind of a check in, a follow up, response to the discussions, something I've read, who knows what. It could be a lot of different things. And then I post an announcement when I've completed the grading of all the assignments that were due the previous week. And I do this for a couple of reasons. One, uh, not all students, I know it's hard to believe, but not all students read your grading comments. Some students I've actually found in my experience that some students don't realize that if they click on the grade, they can actually see the comments made on papers and stuff like this. So I post an announcement saying that I've completed the grading, but then I may make a couple of general observations about the assignments. I don't go into details about, John did this and Andrew did that, but I may say one of the things I'm finding in several of these assignments is a lack of support, and then talk about why that's important to include. So I find those help too, because that kind of steers students to the grading comments, because if they hadn't looked at them, this announcement may give them a little inclination to do so and to learn from their mistakes and improve their writing as they go. So those are the three ways that I post announcements throughout a week. That's one way that we can create a good, strong presence in an online class. The another way, which is maybe to some of you a more obvious way, is through the participation in discussions. However, there are different views on what that participation should look like. The first one is, oops, there we go. The first one is non-participation. In other words, the faculty member may read through and kind of moderate what's going on, but they don't interact in the discussion at all because they don't want to stifle the conversation. And there's some studies out there that kind of show that to be true. And I realize that, but I think the best way is to have some sort of active participation in a discussion. So as we talk about that, is first of all, it's not necessary to respond to each and every student in a discussion. Uh, we teach here at Moody to interact with half of your class one week and then half of the class another week. Dr. Russ, uh, doggone it, what's his name, Andrew? Now I forgot. I just went blank. Hold on. I've got his email here. But Russ says that, he creates a spreadsheet, and he will record all the students' names down the list and then keep track of who he responds to each week to ensure that he does not overlook a student. And so that's a good way to do it. But when we interact with our students in a discussion, it also helps us to set the tone of the discussion. Sometimes it's good, especially if it's a more difficult discussion that could go in a lot of different ways. Sometimes it's best to kind of give an example of what we're looking for, maybe be the first person to respond to the discussion. So that kind of sets the tone. We want to ask questions of our students, especially if they don't offer any support, but they're just stating opinions. A lot of times I will ask in the discussion, what is it that you've read that led you to that conclusion? And, and I tell my students once in a while, I might push back a little bit in discussions, but that's okay because I'm trying to advance the conversation. And most students take that as a good thing. Discussions, I find, do improve over the weeks as the students get more comfortable with the expectations that I've set. And this, on a side note, this also helps in grading discussions. Since I've been actively involved with them, I've been in the discussions and read the comments over the course of the week. When it comes to grading, I don't have to spend as much time reading their discussions because I'm already familiar with it. So then I'm looking for other things specifically in the discussions when grading them. And there's another way uh, about participating in discussions, and that's called the summary approach. And this is something I was not too familiar with. I mean, I knew of it, but I wasn't that didn't think it through very well. But somebody at the conference I went to a couple of weeks ago presented this. Her name is Dr. Aaron from University of Denver, and she promotes the idea of summary, where she at the end of the day on 3 or 4 different days of the week will kind of summarize what was discussed, and then that leads the students in the right direction. So if students kind of go off on a rabbit trail, her summary will lead them back in the direction they need to be. I'm actually going to have a sit down with her in a couple of weeks, middle of July, to talk about this a little more detail and interview her for our podcast that we do for adjunct faculty. Another way to create a strong presence online is to add content to your course. Now, I know it's important not to change the requirements for a course, add grading assignments, things like that, but some things that you can do are to post some mini lectures, maybe a short 5-minute video about the topic, something I call these ramblings, and I'll tell my students, be sure to look for my rambling on such and such. And they're usually a short story of something that has happened in the recent week or so that is connected to what we're talking about in our class, or it may be based on something I've read or some experience I've had in the past in ministry or in teaching. So I call these ramblings, but just a quick 5-minute video. I don't do them all that often, but every now and again I will post one. Particularly, I think it's in my interpreting scriptures class. I post one each time because I think it's so important to understand how to reach to unbelievers. And when we get bogged down in Christianese, if you will, we can lose people that are not familiar with the Bible. So I have a rambling about that on a video. We can post PowerPoint presentations with a voiceover. And again, that needs to be kept short, but using things like Screen-o-cast to record a voice over PowerPoint presentation is a good way to uh, promote an online presence. So in one class I teach a class in Psalms, and I have a couple of those to where I discuss how Jesus Christ is foretold through Psalms. I have another one discussing the genres of the Psalms, things like that. So I find those are important, and I find students will often cite those in their papers and discussions, which makes me feel like I know they're being looked at and viewed. We can also post links to videos or web articles that we found interesting from blogs or reputable websites, things like that. YouTube videos, a lot of times there's stuff out there. So there's lots of ways that we can add content to the course as a way of supplementing what our students are learning and helping to connect them with the topic each week. And then we can also reach out to students through either email or phone calls. While this is actually more of a behind the scenes approach, and people won't notice it if anybody's monitoring your class and they don't see this as participation because you're sending emails to your students or giving them a phone call, it does still affect your presence in the classroom because you're influencing and encouraging students to get involved in the discussions. So there's a couple of times in particular when I will reach out to students, and the first one is the day after the initial responses are due. So in our case, Saturday morning, if I have students that have not posted to the discussion and they have not reached out to me in some way to, asking for an extra day or telling me what's going on, I'll send a short email just asking how they're doing, reminding them that they missed a due date, and asking if they have any questions or anything I can help them with, and encouraging them to get logged into the course and posting on the online discussion or in the discussion so that they don't fall behind. And the other way that I do that is if a student does not submit an assignment. So come Tuesday morning, I am sending emails to those students who have not posted or submitted an assignment that was due on Monday night. And I usually get some sort of response from students when I do this. And it's usually I got bogged down doing this, I got called out of work doing that or whatever. and it reminds them of the importance of sticking to a due date. And I find that these types of emails, I get good response back, and I can encourage them when they respond back to, make sure they're watching their time, managing their time properly, so they're keeping up on stuff, and the importance of keeping up on due dates and things like that. So this is a behind the scenes way of creating an online presence on an individual level. Maybe that's the best way to look at it. A couple other things to consider when we're talking about creating an online presence. Use the student preview mode. I do this a lot to make sure, this is how I check due dates. If you go through the assignments and you post the due dates in Blackboard, whether you do it through the grade book or through each individual assignment or discussion, I will, either way, it's very easy to miss a due date or post a week off or something like that. So I will go to the student view in Blackboard and then go to the grade, what is it, grades and due dates, I think page is what it is. And then I will review those just to make sure that I've got a due date for every assignment, rubrics when appropriate, hopefully in every assignment, and make sure they're all posted, the due date is posted correctly. Sandra asks, do you have a template email to notify students about missing assignments? Actually, I do. I am a big believer in saving time. I have templates on just about everything that I do. Sorry about that. Somebody's coming to the door. I have templates on just about everything that I do. I have templates that I use for grading assignments. I have templates that I use for emails. And one of them is a template email to notify students about missed assignments. So if you want one of those, Sandra, it's just a quick 2-3 sentences, but I'd be happy to email a copy of that to you. Because you'll find in my templates, I have name, comma, and then whatever it is, and I type it in all capital letters so that I don't miss it when I copy and paste it into the actual email, and then substitute their name for the word name. So shoot me an email, Sandra, and I will get that to you. My email will be here on the last post here. So use the student preview. I think that's an important thing. And the final thing is to model the behavior that you want or that you expect in your classroom. And so one of the easiest ways to do that is how you participate in discussions. Do the students see you in the discussion on more than one day? Are you logging in on Saturday and responding to half your students and that's all they see of you? Or are you participating 1 or 2 times, 3 or 4 times during the week? So I think that when we model the behavior, and that also goes for things such as, I'm using my hands and I know you just can't see them, but that goes for how we write emails, how we post our discussions. I write everything out in Microsoft Word with 2 graduate degrees. You'd think I could spell correctly, but I still don't. I can't speak correctly either. But I use those tools, and I expect my students to do that as well. And so I try to model everything. So I have proper grammar, proper spelling, proper tone, all of that stuff, in everything that I do online to ensure that my students have a good example in me. So hopefully that's it. So just to review real quick, to create an online presence, we want to use announcements in a strategic way. We want to be participating in discussions so that our students see us in the course. We want to add content as appropriate, whether it be just a personal illustration or something like that. And we want to reach out to those students who perhaps are not participating as they should. So the questions I want to ask you with or leave you with are, how often do you find yourself logging into your course? And do your students, are they aware of your presence in an online class? So Mary asked, regarding adding content to the course, where do you add links to your video or web page? That's a good question. I typically will post it as an you're talking about adding content. I will post it in the week that it occurs. So I'll add an item. Now, I don't know if everybody knows how to do that, and I don't mean to open a can of worms, but it's pretty simple to add something to a week. So I will do that. So I'll add the content right there in the week of the assignment or the whatever the week is in the course. I'll just add an item and embed a video or something like that. But if you don't know how to do that or you're not comfortable doing that, absolutely post an announcement and just make it just an announcement during the midweek or part of your overview. You might have a link in your weekly overview. Hey, I've got a couple of videos posted, or here's some articles that I've read that might be of interest, and have them linked right there in your announcement. I think that'd be a good way to do it too. Good. Okay. I see Sandra. Any questions of anybody else? That's all I have for you. I've pretty much burned up our half hour. But any other questions from anybody? Using the announcements is great. Use email to connect to people too. Absolutely. Absolutely. And the question is, Sandra, that leads me to another question. Do you set up your announcements so that they're emailed out to your students? You know, they get a notification whenever you post an announcement, but you can also click the box down at the towards the bottom of the page in Blackboard to where it will send a copy of the announcement in an email to that student. Now, I like to do that too, simply because then they don't have to log in to Blackboard to read it. They get it right there on their smartphone, and they can read it and take action on it, or take a note of something, things like that. Andrew says, thanks. I do email my announcements to students so it shows up in their Gmail or Yahoo account on their phone. I think it's critical. I think it's great. You know, we want to have them connect to us in any way possible. Yeah, try that, Sandra. I think you'll find it's a good thing. And then it automatically will send you a copy of it too, so you'll see what it looks like. For whatever reason, I use Outlook for my email, and the videos never show up. So I always include in the announcement, if you cannot see the video, please click here to view it on YouTube. I add that in all my announcements as well, because for whatever reason, when I get the email with a copy of the announcement, the video is not there. I don't know. I haven't spent the time to look into that. It's probably just the way Outlook reads it. I haven't tried to send it to my personal account and see if it shows up that way. Do you think the video script is essential? I speak extra chatty in my videos. Sorry, Frank. You're using a word I can't say. Yeah, I do, but I don't follow it word for word. I will create, it's actually what I'm looking at as I'm recording the video. So I will use it as a script, but like you, I will go down rabbit trails, go into more detail, talk off the cuff as I'm doing right now. And of course, that is not in the transcript. So I just make sure that the transcript has the essential information, the assignments listed, the due dates, particular things I'm looking for. But as far as comments and things like that, nah, I leave it. And it does keep me on track. Mary, you know me well enough, I think, that if I don't have a script in front of me, I am going to be all over the page. And so I've been preaching lately, a lot lately, and my wife gets after me about that because I have to have a script to stay on topic. But then I pause in the middle and say, I just thought of something. And Beth always goes, oh man, what's he going to say now? All right. Anything else? I appreciate you being here on this chat. It's always more interesting to have a chat like this with people in attendance, so that I have questions to respond to and people to laugh at my jokes, even though I can't hear you. But I appreciate the fact that you took the time to listen in. We're going to repeat this presentation at 6 o'clock Central Standard Time tonight. So if you want a, what do they call it, an encore, feel free to join me then. Thank you, Frank. I appreciate that. Sandra, appreciate that. So with that, Mike, I'll turn it over to you as far as the recording goes, but I'll stick around for a few minutes if there's any more questions or comments or anything anybody wants to talk about. I'm here.